is an independent curator and cultural policy specialist. She was editorial director of the Contemporary African Art magazine, Revue Nord, from 1994 to 2001. She has curated exhibitions in Africa, Europe, and the USA. The author of strategic plans for national and international institutions. She has also been a professor at the Senegal University, Egypt, and a lecturer at the Makerere School of Fine Arts, South Africa, and the Abdou Momon University, Niger. She was the General Commissioner of the Africa 2020 seasons in France, 2020 to 2021. This is not written in her bio, but I have something to say about the keynote speaker today. We met some good, 6 or 7 years ago, Ngone? 9, you see? And when I met Ngone, I was still a very young person, just finishing my studies, not having a clue what curating even is. And she was surprised that I wanted to be a curator, and she offered that I would be her mini her, which is mini me, right? And since then, she has really held my hand through all, presenting me with opportunities. I can always ask her if I'm stranded. And I'm so delighted, Ngone, that you actually managed to come here all the way from Paris to speak on this symposium. I'm so honored by your presence and your dedication towards, people like me coming out as curators in a very difficult circumstance, and yet you stand firm, you hop on those flights and go to different parts of the region to mentor us and to be there for us. I'm really grateful. Thank you so much. Now, I'd like to invite you to the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, please meet Ngone Paul.
Thank you, Martha, for your very kind words. I'm going to be having a formal presentation. I never do that. Normally, I just have slides, and I'm talking to people, but this day is important, this symposium is important, so to make sure I stay on track, I'm going to do on the academic style, and knowing that I'm not an academic, but just forgive me if I'm reading and not looking at you. So it's a real pleasure to be back in Kampala after 9 years. That's when I first came, and this is my second time here. And it's a real pleasure to welcome you all in Kampala for this symposium, part of a program that has been going on for many years, and personal research I have been doing since the mid-90s. When I was the editorial director of Revue Nord magazine, I was constantly looking for women artists during my trips to various African capitals. In 2003, when I was asked to help implement a network celebrating pioneer African women in the performing arts, I wondered who were the ones in the visual arts, my main field of specialty. A few years later, I was invited to write an essay on African women for the Catalogue of Global Feminisms, an exhibition held at the Brooklyn Museum in 2007. That opportunity generated the need for me to find out who were the pioneer women visual artists on the African continent, to contribute to fill the gaps and rewrite the history of African art. I have been advocating and trying to convince young scholars and institutions to contribute. In 2015, I designed a program dedicated to women for the Smithsonian National Museum of African Art in Washington, D.C. In 2019, Karen Milburn curated the I Am exhibition at the museum. And I remember meeting Martha Kazungu for the first time here in Kampala in 2015 and asking her if she knew who were the first women students at the Department of Fine Arts of the Makerere University. She started researching, and hasn't stopped ever since. I took the opportunity of the Africa 2020 season I designed and led to highlight women in the arts, science, and entrepreneurship. The Women Focus, which gathered about 30 projects, was one of the 3 pillars of the season. For the visual arts component, I invited women to curate each an exhibition involving only women from Africa and its diaspora. 9 exhibitions were part of the Women Focus. So this is one of them, The Power in my Hands, at the Modern Art Museum in Paris. And it was co-curated by Odile Burlureau, who is a curator at the museum, and independent curator Susana Souza from Angola. So this is another image from the exhibition, and it gathered about 10 women artists from across the continent. Another exhibition that we did was Memoria, Account of Another History. That was at FRAC Nouvelle-Aquitaine, Mecca, and in Bordeaux. And it was curated by Nadine Houptaquin from Benin, France, and Céline Terror from France. Both are independent curators, and they have their own art organization. Another exhibition is Tanaya, Entre Plis et Chemin, at the FRAC Corte on Corsica Island in the Mediterranean, and it was curated by Shirin Abdelhedi, an independent curator from Tunisia. Another one, Beyond What We See, Once Upon a Time, Once Upon a Future, at the Museum Les Abattoirs in Toulouse, curated by Misla Lipsekal from Ethiopia/Eritrea/Canada. She's based in Toronto. Another one, Katchake and Camélie, Elle a allumé le vif du passé, at the FRAC PACA in Marseille, curated by Eva Barois de Cavel, who is an independent curator and a scholar. Another one, Les Femmes prennent la colline, at the Rio Loco Festival, curated by Fatima Bokoum, and this is a work by Ugandan artist Hélène Nabukenya, who was part of that festival and part of the Women Focus. And she did a residency in Toulouse to create that work with other local women. This is also part of that festival because it was art, fine arts and photography, that exhibition, curated by Fatima Bakoun, who is also independent curator. Another one, How to Make a Country, at FRAC Poitou-Charentes in Angoulême, curated by Lerato Bereng from Lesotho, but based in Cape Town. She's a curator at the Stevenson Gallery in Cape Town. Another exhibition, Une ère de famille, at the Musée d'Art et d'Histoire Paul Éluard in Saint-Denis, co-curated by Farah Clémentine Dramani Issoufou from Benin, France, and Anne Yanover, who was the museum director and chief curator at that time. And the last exhibition that was part of that Women Focus, Listening to Planet March by Caroline Gay, Senegal, Togo, France, at the Cité de l'Espace. It's the space institution, and actually Caroline is also an astrophysician and a visual artist, and her work is always about art and science. And during that residency that she was doing at the space institution, that's when there was international expedition to Planet March, and they were collecting the sound of the planet. And the sound was collected by, let's say, a French technology. And because she was doing the residency, she was able to get copies of the sound of March and to put it in her exhibition, and that was the grand premiere. People could hear sounds of March thanks to Caroline Gay and her work that always involves her two specialities, astrophysics and visual arts. So that is just to give you some example. And so part of that Africa 2020 season Women Focus, there was also a partnership with AWARE that was already mentioned. So in partnership with AWARE, I set up a scientific committee. So here you have the names, to realize a series of presentations and publications highlighting pioneer African women artists. The Njabala Foundation actually was born out of that symposium, and more publications on women artists from Africa have been added to the AWARE website the past 3 years. Tracing a decade, this symposium in Kampala is another step on my long journey. 1960s. is known as the Year of Africa, as 17 African territories gained independence from France, Belgium, and the United Kingdom. It was the beginning of a bright new era, the promise of a future galvanized by demands for liberation, justice, and emancipation. African male activists involved in the independence struggles are always praised as the great leaders and fathers of independence. But why do we hear so little about the women who were involved? And so here in this picture, if you can go back, s'il te plaît, Louise, Amical Cabral, if you don't know, he's extremely, like, almost a god in West Africa, especially in the former Portuguese colonies from Cabo Verde and Guinea-Bissau, which is just south of Senegal. And all the struggles started from Dakar, so that's why we know so much about him. And he was the major freedom fighter for the independence of Guinea-Bissau and of Cabo Verde, and his party was called PAIGC, for the independence of Guinea-Bissau, and he was killed a year before the independence of Guinea-Bissau. And so this is one of his most popular quotes that all the kids, we always quote when we're demonstrating. Christians go to Vatican, Muslims to Mecca, and revolutionaries to Algiers, because Algiers was the Mecca of the revolutionaries in the 60s. It was also the headquarters of the Black Panthers from America, and a lot of hardcore radical thinkers and activists were all welcome in Algeria, in the capital Algiers, to plan for revolution. All of them had the communist ideology, and so the ties with the Soviet Union are still there. So this guy is like an icon all over West Africa and in the places like Angola or Mozambique who are Portuguese speaking. And so in the next slide, when I say we all know those leaders, but we don't know the women who were involved in those struggles. And so you can see here this picture taken in '64, and on his right, so on his left, that is our right here, this young girl, Joanna Gomez, was part of the struggles, 14 years old, and became a member of the parliament at the independence of Guinea-Bissau. She's been interviewed by an American journalist, and he's planning to do a documentary on her life and on the life of other young female revolutionaries from that area. So for me, that has always been a question. Why don't we never hear about the women who are involved in the independence struggles? And there is indeed some researchers who have been sharing their publications, film, and manifesto and conference program. For instance, from the 19th to the 22nd of September 1956, the first Congress of Black writers and artists was held in Paris at the Sorbonne University. As you can see, so the poster was designed by Pablo Picasso, as you all know, famous French artist, heavily inspired, if not to say copying ancient African art. And on the picture that was taken, the family picture of the Congress, there is only one woman. I don't know if you see her on the front row. Can you all see her? Yes or no? Yes. Okay, so there's only one woman on that picture. So this is the kind of scientific committee team who designed. The mastermind was a Senegalese man called Alioune Diop, who had a publishing house called African Presence that he started in Paris in 1947. And that publishing house still exists today. But there was a team, and so that's the team behind him, and there's only one woman who was involved, Paulette Nardal from Martinique, a French territory, who is the co-founder in 1931 of La Revue du Monde Noir, the magazine of the Black world. So here is a copy of that magazine that didn't last very long, and who is never mentioned as the mastermind of the Negritude movement. There's not enough time to go into the Negritude movement. I hope some of you have heard about it. Otherwise, this evening I can give you a little bit of background. It's an important theoretical movement about claiming your blackness, claiming your Africanness, and it was carried by French Caribbeans and African figures from Francophone Africa. The first president of Senegal is known as the father of negritude. Actually, it's Paulette, never mentioned, mastermind. So here she is, Paulette. She passed away in total silence, one of those women completely forgotten, has been holding salons, and actually all those people that did that Congress of Black artists and writers in Paris all met in her house, because she used to have a salon every week, and they will be talking about race, identity, visibility of Black people in Paris in the 30s. So all these guys met via her in her house. They did together that Congress. They developed the ideology of negritude. And what does history remember? That it's Aimé Césaire and Léopold Sédar Senghor who are the fathers of negritude. Paulette? Nobody knows Paulette. This is Paulette. Her writings and vision have been instrumental in the construction of political, intellectual, and artistic discourse that carried the many independence movements on the African continent. So, Colette, I praise you. Other important women almost forgotten. In 1957, Theodosia Salome Okoh, Ghanaian stateswoman, sportswoman, teacher, and artist, designed the Ghanaian flag. How many people, including in Ghana, know that their flag, known as the Black Star, was designed by a woman? Very few. From July 14 to 21st, 1959, the Conference of Women of Africa and African Descent opened in Accra, Ghana. It was organized by the Federation of Ghana Women, led by Evelyn Amartefio, with the collaboration of Claire Drake, Dorothy Padmore, Shirley Graham Du Bois, and Amy Jack Garvey. 150 delegates from West African countries, the United States, and the West Indies Federation participated in that groundbreaking conference. The first Congress of the West African Women's Union was held from July 20 to 23 in 1959 in Bamako, Mali. It brought together women from Guinea, Dahomey, known today as Benin, Senegal, and French Sudan, known today as Mali. Delegates emphasized the cultural dimension of their Africanness due to the similarity of colonial history, as well as the cultures and traditions shared in these regional states, as many of the people were part of the same empires and kingdoms before colonization. And several women encouraged a sense of belonging to what they defined as a common West African culture. In the 1960s, this was a pillar in the construction of a women-led Pan-Africanism in Francophone West Africa. And I come from that line of thought myself as somebody born in the 60s, but after the independence of Senegal. On August 1st, 1960s, the Women's Improvement Society of Nigeria opened a 12-day Congress titled African Women Chart Their Future at the University of Ibadan in the southwest of Nigeria. 55 women from 8 West African countries came together for the first time across linguistic and colonial dividing lines. Housekeepers, merchants, doctors, teachers, midwives, social workers, and politicians, the delegates, aged 30 to 50, were chosen by the women's organization of their countries as figures capable of questioning the problems linked to the West African societies and to women in particular. On their agenda, discussing the future of African women in independent nations and in a new Africa, free from colonial domination. The debates constitute a backdrop for the action of national organization and feminist theoretical reflections carried out in Africa during the following decades. In July 1962, in Dar es Salaam, African women hailing from 14 countries and representing a dozen of resistance organizations attended the Conference of African Women. The goal of the conference was to unite and create a common platform for solidarity and mobilization of their efforts for the rights and freedoms of Africans in their fight for independence and liberation from colonialism, the elimination of apartheid and segregation in all its forms, as well as advocating for the participation of African women in political decision-making structures. During the conference, they created a new organization, the Union of African Women. And it was created 1 year before the founding by men of the Organization of African Unity, known today as the African Union. The same meeting proclaimed an African Women's Day to be celebrated on July 31st each year. In 1974, the Union of African Women was renamed the Pan-African Women's Organization, known as PAO. So if this day, March 8th, is important worldwide, bear in mind that the African Women's Day is on July 31st and is being celebrated, but hasn't have a lot of exposure, unfortunately, across the continent. In 1964, Senegalese journalist Annette Mbaye Derneville founded AWA, the Black Women's Review. It was an independent monthly issued magazine produced in Dakar, Senegal, between 1964 and 1973 by a network of African women. The magazine published poems, short stories, political reports, and essays, but also recipes, articles on fashion, art, furniture, and interior design, as well as pages devoted to readers' letters. It presented the lives of women as citizens, mothers, sisters, workers, and leaders in a global context marked by the Cold War and new forms of Afro-modernity and demands for women's rights. During this first decade of independence, young African states used culture as a tool for nation building, social cohesion, and soft power. The landmark reference of that political strategy is the 1966 World Festival of Negro Art held in Dakar, Senegal. And the mastermind and general commissioner was, again, Alvin, who did the Congress in Paris 10 years before, and who is the founder of that French-English publishing house called African Presence. Historians praise the participation of many male visual artists, writers, performers, and musicians, such as American Duke Ellington, who was there, and choreographer Ailey, Nigerian Wole Soyinka, who won an award, Senegalese playwright Douta Seck, and Senegalese filmmaker Ousmane Sembène, and Ivorian Christian Lattier, who also won an award. But these same historians always omit to name the women who participated. About 200 artists from across Africa were in the Tendance and Confrontation, the contemporary art exhibition. This is the catalogue of Tendance et Confrontation. And Louise, please, if you go back again. Again. So this is a picture from the 1966 exhibition during that festival. And so in the front here, you can see the work of Christian Lattier. So let's go back. So 200 artists were in that. There were two exhibitions, an ancient art exhibition and the contemporary art exhibition. The contemporary art exhibition alone had 200 artists. Going through the archives, I was able, out of those 200, to identify only 2 women out of 200. These are the 2 women. I'm not going to spell the names, it's too challenging, but I could not find any pictures of them or work, but please keep these names in mind, both from Madagascar, and the most surprising is that these 2 women appeared to the festival a decade before, in 1955, according to the French National Archives of Overseas Territories that I was able to access, had an exhibition somewhere in France in 55. And so a decade later, 11 years later, in 66, they are part of this group show, 200 artists, only 2 women. Very interesting. I'm supposed to go, inshallah, next month to Madagascar, and I will do my soft lobby and find somebody who can research on these 2 women, so then we can know more and maybe have something on the AWARE website. So these women have vanished from history. Historians also hardly acknowledge women who contributed to the artistic and conceptual revolutions that spread across the continent in the 60s and 70s. And this is just one example of those women that is hardly known outside of Nigeria. So, as a conclusion, I will say that acknowledging and celebrating these visionary pioneer women is long overdue. And this is why we are here today, gathered in Kampala. We are raising an army. We have been thinking together, building together, and sharing this collective knowledge with audiences around the world. And we will keep on doing so with the contributions of younger generations, because this journey has no end. Thank you.